stuff? Like, do you remember it in bits and pieces? Or?
I just remember it in bits and pieces, and sometimes a lot. Sometimes a lot of it bears on my mind, and I remember a whole lot of it, and sometimes I don't. And I'll always see something I'll see something out here that relates to that. If I see somebody picking up coal on a railroad track, around here in a bucket, some old lady or something other, or see her getting coal out of a slate pile, I think about that, picking that coal up outside that old abandoned mines. Comes back. I remember one time I'd carried so much coal on my back, I had sores on my back. I don't know how old I was, but I had a dream, a most wonderful dream. There was, when I got to the mines to get that coal, there was a beautiful gold-colored little old Jeep sitting there, and I started hauling my coal in that Jeep. And that dream was so real, and I really believed it was there so strong, that the next day I run up there to see if that Jeep was there. That Jeep wasn't there, but I had my sack with me. I just brought me back a sack of coal.
So what'd you do with the coal?
Burn it. Burn it in both the stoves. And the houses back then, they didn't have no insulation. Each year, we put another layer of newspapers on. We first lined the house. It was just boards, 1-inch board thick. Then we put cardboard boxes on that. And then from every year thereafter, we put newspapers on with flour paste. So it was kind of hard to heat, and it took a lot of coal. And the winters were much colder than they are now. Real cold. And so that was my responsibilities, and I done it very well. We never ran out of coal.
Now, what was your, I mean, you were talking a little bit about your dad. So he was, like, did you ever get any notion that he'd done a lot of fighting about the Union and stuff like that?
Well, I wanted to think that. I wanted to think of him as a good Union person, but after going to those meetings to pay his dues for him, I realized that he wasn't. I do believe he blowed the railroad bridge up at Gray's Knob, but somebody probably gave him a direct. I think if John L. Lewis would tell him to do anything, he'd have done it. But if John L. Lewis would have winked on television, that old man would have jumped, because he really liked John L. Lewis, but he sure didn't go to his union meetings.
Why would he blow up a bridge at Gray's Knob? What was going on there?
I can't exactly remember, but I do know that we didn't have no hospital cards. We lost our hospital cards. And I do know that my dad, I could go get the receipts right now. So much a week come out of his check, and we built those hospitals. He built those hospitals, helped build them, and couldn't even go to our own hospitals. And it just hurt everybody so bad, and they wouldn't. And the ones that stayed there had to fight for something, because they didn't know the way to Detroit. You know, just see all my half brothers, they packed up and left. And my old man didn't know how to read. A lot of the miners didn't know how to read, and they just stayed. And they figured if they wasn't going to mine no coal, nobody would. And so one of the ways they done it was blowing up the bridges and just destroying the job where nobody couldn't work if they couldn't. Blow the bridge up, they can't haul the coal. But they burnt the tipples. And a lot of those tipples weren't just burned because of violence either. Because they was mad at the company. There was one tipple burnt down because these people were starving. This guy and his family was starving. And they figured if they burned that damn tipple down, they'd get all that scrap iron, which they did. And sold it. So all this tipple burning wasn't because it wasn't just because that everybody was mad at the damn company. Everybody was starving to death. And I remember people taking the damn window weights out of their house. They were made out of cast iron. I remember people taking window weights out of their house and any empty house they could find and selling them. And it wasn't that big a deal to get the window up without a weight, though. But, and copper stealing. People stole in any way to make it. And they didn't give a damn nobody didn't have no land. They didn't give a damn whose land they farmed. They'd farm the power lines. But you couldn't hardly starve to death back then. The coal washers didn't come until mechanization, so the rivers were running they were full of fish. Very plentiful. Possums were plentiful. Groundhogs were plentiful. And all you need some potatoes and you got a meal. But
So how much was your dad work? This must have been what, 50s?
yeah, it was in the 50s.
Eisenhower.
Yeah, Eisenhower brought in the butter beans, introduced us to yellow meal, which we fed to our hogs and eat the hog. And powdered eggs. I never did know that the chickens laid powders, but they got them somewhere. Powdered eggs. But the best thing that Eisenhower brought into Harlan was that beef and gravy. That was real good canned meat. But the people that ran the program stole from the program and starved the people. The people that run the program started raising hogs and wasn't found out about until 2 or 3 years that they'd been stealing the commodities and giving them to hogs and selling the hogs. The people that ran the programs and letting the people feeding it to their own hogs. Seems like there's a crook every time you get a good program. Any kind of program. The people that run it steal it. That goes for unions. I love the union, but the union stole those miners' hospitals. They bought them. They paid to build them. Then they were sold. I wish the miners would have had enough sense to have their name put on the deed so they'd had to sign the deed before they could have been sold, rather than a bunch of executives that were wanting to line their pockets. But when we had medical care, we had that full employment. We had our own doctors in every community we could go to.
Now, okay, so you were still living at Gray's Knob, or?
Neff Holler.
Oh.
Still living at Neff Holler.
And what kind of place did you live farm? What did you do?
We raised hogs, a mule, but what I never could figure out, we've been better off not to raise the mule, not to keep the mule, because we grow all this corn and beans and taters, but we growed more for the mule than we did ourselves. We grew all the corn, feed all the corn to the mule. It makes sense to trade all that corn for this mule doing this little bit of work in the potato patch. That's the way it was.
How many days a week was your dad working then? How much a week was he working?
My dad would never work over 5 days a week, no matter what they said. He went to town on Saturday, every Saturday. So did about everybody else go to town. And they swapped knives and guns and talked and joked and
What kind of jokes were they telling at that time?
what kind of jokes were they telling? Oh, they'd joke about a gun, where they'd sold somebody a gun. That wasn't no count, or where somebody sold somebody a dog. This one guy used to sell dogs in particular, and what he done is he'd tell you to be over to his house, like at 9 o'clock at night. Well, you'd go to his house and to try out a dog. Well, what he done is he had him a cage full of coons way up on this ridge. He kept them up there and he fed them. Well, when you went there, his wife would say, his old dog treed a while ago, and he had to go up there and check on it. Just sit down and he'll be back in a minute. And when he come back, he'd bring one of them coons out of that cage that he had. And you just have that dog that you want to trade for with him. Be leading that old dog, and you'd think that's the best dog in the country. And he'd sell it to you. You wouldn't even want to try it out then, because you know he had the coon in his hand and leading that dog. And they'd do stuff like that, and then they'd brag about it.
Did you come over here to trade too?
I never did come to Ramsey, Virginia to trade. My dad and them always come to Ramsey. I used to go to Middlesboro. I don't remember what day it was. We either went on a Wednesday or a Thursday. No, it was on a Thursday, I believe, in Middlesboro, and Wednesday's always been in Ramsey. But they traded dogs. Dogs were very important then, because you could catch possums with them. Dogs was worth money. A good dog was really, you could just take that dog out any night you wanted to and catch yourself a possum. I mean, everybody makes possum jokes now. There wasn't no joke then, they were good. But back now, everybody thinks, hell, if it hadn't been for possums, and we wouldn't have survived. Poke salad. We eat a lot of poke. We eat a lot of wild food. Fish. We eat good, just didn't have no money. No medical either. No running water. But it still wasn't good times, because I think everybody in this country, I think I get pissed because I didn't get an education. I'm still pissed about it. I thought I was pretty intelligent back then. I would have liked to went to school like the superintendent's boys around that area.
So where did you go to school?
Chevrolet, Kentucky. gym, schoolhouse. Outdoor toilets. Rocky playground. 4 big pot-belly stoves. Had a basketball court, swings. And sometimes school was nice. They had these guys from 4-H that used to come there and talk to us. They had the guys from the forestry department come there and talk about minerals and wildlife. And I really liked them because they'd show us a movie about how we should protect the forest. And it's always stuck with me. I'm pretty anti-stripping. I think that meant a lot to me. And we used to have a guy come there. His name was Mr. Pinky. God, I used to love it. All of us kids loved it when he come. He would play the piano and sing, and we just loved it. And then he'd go out and play games with us. And the teachers let us out for real long recesses, and he'd run, play games, and sing. And he was like a big old clown, but it was real fun. He was like an actor. Happiest man I ever seen. And showed it. He was really happy, and he really enjoyed doing that for us kids. We didn't have a piano at the school. They hauled it there. And then when he left, they took it with him.
Where'd he come from?
He worked for the county. That was his job. He went around to all the schools ever so often, and in the county, and he'd play the piano.
What kind of songs do you sing?
Gosh, I don't remember. I know one thing. He sung Old Susanna, but he sang it in a different style.
Well, did it sound like mountain style, or was it more?
It was more rock style. Faster. Fast. Sounded better than "Oh, Susanna." That's the way most people say. He put some life into it. I never will forget that. It was fun. I used to, some of the fun part, or non-fun parts, were eating dinner with all them kids. I'd take oatmeal in an old quart jar, and it looked like dog shit in the jar, but pardon my English, but it didn't look good, and all them other kids was that white bread, and they had that piece of lettuce on there, and a piece of bologna. Damn, I'd give anything to have one of them sandwiches. Sure would. But I know now that what I was eating was probably better than what they was. Since I've learned, I won't even eat white bread now.
Now, what kind of did you go to school with kids that were kids of superintendents and?
Yeah. All of us kids went to school together except the blacks. They had a school on up the holler. And we didn't have no prejudice feelings towards those kids. It was just the county that had separate schools. But don't reckon there ever was any struggle when they finally integrated. There wasn't no problem, or cause.
Now, what kind of were the kids of the operators treated different from the kids of the?
Yeah, they were. They were treated better. No matter how good a basketball player you was, if you had a coal operator donating uniforms to the school, or donating money towards the band, or buying the cheerleaders clothes, They don't give a damn how good they could play. They got a position on that team, even if you didn't get it. But I did get it. I played basketball. I wasn't. I just didn't have any money to buy a Coke or anything after the game, so I quit.
How do teachers treat you? Do they treat everybody the same? Or?
No, they didn't treat everybody the same. They made a difference. I never did see none of the upper class kids get beat. I've seen guys with stitches in their face where them teachers hit them with switches. I have fought them when they tried to whoop me, but I've been whooped. But
Did you ever feel ashamed of yourself when you were in school?
I felt ashamed of myself a lot. I know wearing the wrong size shoes, that really bothered me. Sometimes they'd take me to somebody, they didn't never pay for me a haircut. And hell, it looked like somebody put a bowl around my head. And I was ashamed. I just wished I could have crawled inside of myself and hid. Just hid. From the wrong kind of haircut. Unclean clothes. Breeches that